Welcome to New Realities. My name is Alan Steinfeld, and on this show I like to investigate the nature of consciousness. How do we know what we know, and what is being presented to us today as a bigger scope of understanding, a greater concept of the world around us, and new information is coming in, new perceptions and awarenesses are being input into our culture to force us into an expansion of consciousness, an expansion of greater possibilities, and breaking out of an old conditioning that has locked us into seeing the world through a very narrow chink in a fence, and to see a greater universe is really the kind of subjects and information I like to give people on this show. Today I have two very special guests. Jim Fetzer from the University of Minnesota, former philosophy professor in critical thinking and I would say ontological realities. Is that a way of saying it?
Close enough.
And an expert as well on the 9/11 truth movement. And to my left, I have Christine Ebersole, actress, Tony Award winner this year of Bray Gardens, who's had her own spiritual and political awakening. So thank you both for being here. I like to combine politics, spirituality, art. So in your evolution as a being, where did this awakening of consciousness first begin for you?
Well, of course, it's hard to, it's kind of like an unfolding of a lotus flower, isn't it? I mean, it's really just kind of a lifelong process. When I was 33 years old, however, I did receive Shaktipat from Guru Maya Chitvilasananda. So I think that was a very, very specific, conscious awakening to pursue spiritual life. I think up until that time, I was always pursuing it, but I didn't have the awareness in the way that I did when I received Shaktipat.
Did something then open up for you? Did you start to see reality as different after that as before? Or? Yeah,
I think I did. And I started to see through consciousness, and I started to see the connectedness of all things. And I didn't, which I might not have been conscious, I might have been doing it naturally before, but this was an absolute awareness of the connectedness of all things. And I think that that's really how it's affected my political views as well, because these things that are said to us, either you're with us or you're with the terrorists, well, who's the terrorist?
We are.
Yeah. We are. Yeah. Aren't we the terrorists? I mean, besides being, so we're not other. It's all, it's like the Shylock, in Merchant of Venice. If you cut us, we'll bleed.
Yeah.
And I think that holds true for the Iraqi people and all those others that the culture is set up to make us think that that's reality, that we are separated from one another, and that's not reality.
Right. So your spiritual awakening has led to this political awareness that we're one world. It's ridiculous to have division and secrecy, and I think even governments that control one part of the population versus another. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either.
Doesn't make sense to you, Jim?
Well,
can't we just all get along?
Exactly. Is that too Pollyanna? Is that?
Well, I think that's really what, unfortunately,
Rodney King.
I think what happens is, that's right. I think what it is that people live under the illusion that we're separate from God. I mean, however you want to, that's the word I choose, God, but it's, in other words, that divine source from which we all come from and which we will all return to when we shed our mortal coil. That's what I'm talking about, how that spiritual awakening affects the socio-political world, because we have to help each other and have to help each other along and help those that are afraid choose faith and try to walk in faith.
But then there are forces that definitely are on the planet that want to keep us separate, it seems. They want to keep divisions and power.
Yes, but you know, there's a very interesting story that somebody tells. I'm sure it's apocryphal, but I think it was Ford, who was a clairvoyant, that said that when Hitler died, he went to heaven and started goose-stepping around and ordering people around, and everyone was like, beat it, you know. So I think in that sense, the whole fable about that is that people have as much power as we give them. And when we give it away and don't take any responsibility for having our own, the power exists within, that the God of ourselves exists within. It's not something outside of ourselves. Then we can start to take it back, and that the people that are lording it over us at this point, then they start to lose their power.
I agree with that, and I agree with this, especially the spiritual descriptions of being the divine essence. But how does that fit in with a philosophical critique of reason and a political position where governments, from your perspective, from what I know of you, have taken control from us, from the people? I mean, where does that fit in with
Well, so much of the authority of government derives from the perpetuation of illusions. This is especially true in relation to 9/11. Will Rogers famously observed that all he knew was what he read in the newspapers. If you could control the newspapers then, or if you can control the mass media now, you can manipulate the American people by controlling their access to information. So you have to develop your capacity to read critically anything you're being exposed to. Go to multiple sources, especially non-United States, non-U.S. sources. Like you can probably find more truth in Al Jazeera or in Pravda, astonishingly, about 9/11 or the Iraqi war than you can find in the New York Times.
Well, just take what the news reports give us when they say insurgents, the insurgent. Who are the insurgents? I mean, what? I mean, it's just insane to use their definitions and just blank out because they're giving us what we think is information.
You're absolutely right, Alan, because that term is completely abusive. We are an army of occupation. What we are confined there is a resistance movement. It's as though, you know, hundreds of thousands of Chinese occupied the United States. Would we be an insurgency? Only if the Chinese occupation was legitimate. But our invasion of these nations in violation of international law, the UN Charter, and the U.S. Constitution is massively illegitimate, immoral, corrupt.
And the news doesn't even question its own information. I mean, it doesn't even tell you what these insurgents are fighting for. I mean, are they fighting for their freedom, their religion? I mean, it just blanks you out. And
Alan, walking over here today, I was given a complimentary copy of the New York Post, and to my astonishment, the reason I'm convinced it's being given out for free today is a story about a new tape allegedly from Osama bin Laden claiming that he has dyed his hair. Vain Osama loses gray in new vid. Now, this photograph looks nothing like Osama. This conjures up the image of him watching the Just for Men commercials with Clyde explaining no play for Mr. Gray. So Osama wants to redo his hairstyle so he can get those great chicks in the bars. Okay? Now, this is so ludicrous, Alan.
It's insane.
In Islam, you're not even allowed to use jewelry. You think they're going to encourage you to change your complexion using makeup and hair dye? Well, plus this guy doesn't even look like Osama. Plus, what you got going on here, okay, is another propaganda video that we'll be able to study and expose for what it is. But even from this little clip here, this guy doesn't look remotely like Osama bin Laden. So they found an actor to make you not draw the immediate comparison. They're changing his appearance. He's got regular dark hair. They're not turning it gray, but using him anyway.
Well, but plus, if you would believe the official story, this is such a slap in the face to all those people that died, that he supposedly is the cause of. I mean, even if you believe the official story.
Alan, there are 2 points involved there. Number one is the government's been playing us for suckers from scratch. I mean, the idea that this could be on the front page of the Post, and they're giving it out for free, it means they think every one of us is so simple-minded, we're going to accept it.
And that we care that his beard is black and not gray. I mean, like
they're explaining it in advance. See, they're telling us, right, when you see the video, this is priming the pump psychologically. psychologically.
It's not as important as fashion secrets.
Well, that's the debate. There's the debate, Christine. You see, but this is the meat and potatoes.
But I don't get it. So what is the media then trying to?
Well, the media is in the service of the government, which wants us to believe it's official account, even though it's disprovable in every significant respect.
It's an insult even to the official account. You know what I mean? It's like
it is, Alan, and the point you made in passing, I want to underscore, namely, there's no higher form of respect we can pay to the survivors of those who died on 9/11. And in a broad sense, that includes all of us, than to discover how and why they died, which our government manifestly has not told us. In fact, the FBI over a year ago acknowledged it had no hard evidence connecting this guy to the events of 9/11. The Taliban, you may remember, said they would turn him over to American authorities if only we could produce proof that he had something to do with it. Condoleezza Rice said, oh, we'll prepare a white paper that does just that, but we've never done it, and the reason is simple. We can't.
Well, Christine, you told a beautiful story about singing at the funeral of one of the chief of the medallion firefighters, and these people have given their lives for something. I mean, are those people ready to open up to the possibility that something else was going on behind 9/11, or would they just think this was all insane?
I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. I really don't. But, you know, the way I see it is that, you know, they say the Lamb of God that taketh away the sins of the world. The sin is really our ignorance. And if those people that died on 9/11 in the World Trade Center, if they had to die to bring awareness to us about the truth of what is happening, their death is not in vain. And that's what I think we have an obligation to those people that died, to bring the truth, let the truth emerge, and to bring their death, to bring justice somehow, so that they didn't die in vain. And that's really what it is, because they sacrificed, they were the sacrificial lambs, and our ignorance is perpetuating that. And by bringing the truth and awareness to what really happened and who perpetuated this atrocious crime, then we are all liberated.
But then reality is nothing like the way we've been conditioned to think it is either, and that was what you said. It's cognitive dissonance on a cultural level.
Just to illustrate the blatancy with which the media would abuse us with false information. We have discovered archival footage of the BBC announcing the collapse of Building 7, which was referred to as the Solomon Brothers building because the Solomon Brothers had 30 floors in the building, at 4:57, when the building, in fact, did not collapse until 5:20. 23 minutes too early, they have a reporter announcing that Building 7 has collapsed, and in the background you can see Building 7, which is as stunning an example as you'll ever find of complicity between the intelligence agencies, the American government, and the mass media. This is the BBC.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No,
it's extraordinary. You can get it on YouTube. She's standing there saying, the Solomon Brothers building has collapsed. And then there's a sign that says, whoops, because it's still standing.
Over her left shoulder, you can see the building in the background.
What are they trying to do with something like that? I mean,
well, they
had a script. They had a script, and they got their timing. They were all for their timing. You know, timing is everything. An actress will tell you.
They got their information too early.
That's right.
And what was the reason then?
Prematurely.
And then when it was starting to collapse, then her digital feed just kind of went haywire. Oh, we've lost time.
Well, you got to understand, Alan, this is just a stunning behind the scenes. This is the man behind the curtain you don't normally get a glimpse of.
Exactly.
Carl Bernstein published an article in Rolling Stone in 1977 about the CIA and the media, where CIA officials were explaining that they had their greatest successes with Time Life, CBS, and the New York Times. In 1977, if you controlled those media giants, you had pretty much a lock on the American media. More recently, CIA officials have let out that they have control of every major figure in the American media. And Alan, I believe it's probably true.
And the reason they're controlling it is to, like the New York Post, brainwash us into thinking something is true that it isn't.
Absolutely. If they can't preserve their illusion, they can't preserve their authority. Without their authority, you're not going to have respect and be able to manipulate the American people.
So can you tell us, because you are a philosopher and a critical thinker, how do we start to find truth, unravel lies? I mean, in a very broad sense, because we have to look at everything the media gives us and start to say, well, what's the reason they're showing it to us, and what are they trying to do, and what's the truth?
Well, I think it's terribly important if you have a small group that has been very outspoken and includes highly competent individuals like David Ray Griffin, the leading figure in 9/11, has published over 30 books, a distinguished professor of religion emeritus, 5 books on 9/11. These are extremely well-researched, well-documented. Compare one of David Ray Griffin's books, for example, the 9/11 Commission Report, Omissions and Distortions, copiously noted, very extensive, with Popular Mechanics' little book. No notes. They mention some references, but you would never know what goes with what. And the Popular Mechanics is basically rubbish. For example, it says an explanation of Building 7.
Yes.
This building that collapsed at 5:20, that was prematurely announced on the BBC. It was hit by no jet aircraft, had no jet fuel fires, had a couple of very modest fires,
right,
and it collapsed in a complete, total, and abrupt, symmetrical, into its own footprint demolition, which Peter Jennings and Dan Rather on the scene at the time said, this looks just like the destruction of the resorts and casinos we've seen so many times in Las Vegas, and indeed it did. And you have to listen to these experts and listen to their arguments, see if you can figure out what they're saying and why they're saying it. There's so much evidence here, but it requires having the courage to do it, the courage to take control of your own life and determine what is the truth for yourself, as opposed to passively receiving what the government would have you believe.
Right, it's what you said about being ignorant, and then waking up and realizing you can never go back to sleep once you know a little piece of the truth.
Well, that's the nature of consciousness.
Yeah.
Is being awake. Once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep.
So what's crucial, Alan, is there's action and there's a belief, and your actions are based on your beliefs. So if your beliefs are false, then your actions may be very inappropriate. You may be, in fact, supporting a government that you ought to be opposing.
Mm-hmm. So what main belief should we start to really question in order to create action, to take control back from a government that people are afraid of? You know, it used to be that the government was afraid of the people. Now the people are afraid of the government.
And that's the difference between a free society and a tyranny, Alan, precisely.
So how do
You'll find encyclopedic compilations like Everything You Know Is False, or They're Lying to You, or Barry Zwicker has a very good book called The Towers of Deceit.
I interviewed Barry.
And he's talking about all the ways the media has misled and confounded us. And I'm sorry to say that even includes some very prominent public intellectuals on our scene, such as Noam Chomsky, for example, who, in spite of all of his good work, has had blinders on when it comes to 9/11 on the one hand and JFK on the other.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, I I understand what you're saying, and it is coming back to consciousness and this awakening, and what I also like to include is there's all this discussion about truth, but in the arts, truth is also something felt in a human experience. I mean, it disregards the facts, and the truth of an artistic creation is the feeling it gives in the person, and they know what their feeling is true. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you reconcile that with truth on an objective scale? Here's subjective truth in the arts and objective truth in the political world. And the two have to you have to feel good about our government and good about ourselves. I'm just saying.
I think it's the integration of the authentic life lived in accordance with objective truth that can be the fulfillment of human existence. The highest degree of consciousness, right action based on true belief.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as an artist, then how do you integrate those political stance of what is truth into a personal understanding of what is true? Do you know? Or you just...
Well, I think it's exactly what Jim said. It's applying your knowledge of truth to a love of mankind. And that's what really, it's agape, it's God's love of man. And that if we're all connected and we're all made from that divine source, then it is our joy and blessing and responsibility to include one another in helping in our own personal salvation.
Today, Alan, some of the greatest access routes to the truth include talk radio, public television, and the Internet, which is why the Pentagon is now, regarding the Internet, treating it as an enemy because the Internet threatens its control and domination of information being provided to the American people. If we can have independent access to information and judge what we're being told is false, it loses its efficacy, which is why when they start to shut down the Internet, you will know that the complete and total domination of our society is at hand.
There was just something in
Is that going to happen?
about net neutrality being...
That's so scary. How can they do that? I thought they couldn't keep up with all that.
Well, there's something about net neutrality they're going to do away with.
Well, they would like to privatize the Internet and make it the case that to do all the things we do now for free, that you're going to have to pay a fee.
Ooh.
Just look at how much that's going to curtail, because that means you only get on the net when you absolutely have to. So they can use those kinds of mechanisms to clamp down, to close it down, eventually to shut it off.
Well, who is they?
Well, the military-industrial complex is right at the core of this, Alan. There's no question about it. The CIA, the National Security Agency, are right at the heart and soul of conducting surveillance on the American people and seeking to constrain what information we get and what we don't.
Well, it's bigger than the American people. I heard in London there are cameras everywhere, and you have to pay a fee to drive, and you have to be photographed and identified to drive in the middle of London. It's a lot worse in England and Britain than it is here.
Well, it may be. They certainly have a lot of security cameras, but they're going in the United States too. Police departments are being given money, special funds to install surveillance cameras in the cities of our country.
Okay, but I'm just interested about the Internet thing, because now, is this something that has to be passed by Congress, or can they just say, oh, you know,
I would like to believe,
terrorists, or...
I would like to believe, Christine, it's going to become a huge issue because such a large and volatile segment of the population is an Internet user, understands the kind of resource it represents.
That's how I got all the information about 9/11.
That's right.
On the Internet.
Well, Scholars for 9/11 Truth is a virtual society. We could not exist but for the Internet.
Exactly.
Well, most people now rely on the freedom of the Internet for information, for everything that we are now moving into as a global village. I mean, the Internet is vital to breaking down the borders and creating a world planet.
Well, as long as we're conscious of the importance of the Internet here and keeping ourselves free, we can take steps to try to preserve that freedom because we need it. It's an indispensable mechanism to gaining access to information that isn't contaminated by the government.
And also, you speaking out from the position you're in about what you feel to be truth is very important for people who can only hear it from someone in your position. I mean, it's a vital resource. I mean, and it's your choice to take that responsibility. Do you feel any pressure to do that one way or the other?
No, sometimes I get, sometimes I get afraid, but I don't. I think the more I have participated in the 9/11 Truth movement, the less afraid I am. It was really at the beginning when I first took the plunge that was really scary, because it was the, page 6, added to the list of kooks, and the National Enquirer, and Jim was very, very helpful to me during that time, and really, really made me feel so supported when I was in the throes of just my terror, and I called him on the phone, and he had me come on the radio, and it was such a big help.
We did a 2-hour talk show this February discussing Christine's experience in relation to 9/11.
To your awakening of that.
No, it was to when I decided to consciously become public about it, and that's when it, when.
What we need are more intelligent, courageous human beings like Christine who realize there's more to life than their careers or their awards or their personal success. There is this nation in which we believe, and there are major threats to its integrity, and we must, each of us individually, do everything we can to cope with it because the threat is overwhelming.
Well, I see it as a planetary problem, a disease of the planet, the fact that we have borders that don't let us meet each other as equals. I mean, there's governments in the way of creating what is really a cohesive planet.
Well, Alan, you sound like a one-world government guy at this point in time.
I don't want it, but that's also the negative I don't want to get into a one-world government.
Beware that you may get some of what you're asking for with the North American Union. Bush wants to abolish the borders between Canada and Mexico.
I want to get more
10-lane
into like
NAFTA
John
superhighway.
Imagine, though. You know,
Convert to the Amiro.
yeah, but how do we balance
And
that?
they're doing this. They're doing this now.
I mean, a bigger truth than 9/11, I think, is the UFO situation, that there are ships the government has gotten. And
no, and we're trying to keep our feet on the ground regarding 9/11, so not take off into space.
You can't start talking about Bigfoot now.
No, but that's all
that's another show. That's another show, Alan.
But that's another show as 9/11. It really is, because it's one conspiracy at a time. But no, that is a huge cover-up and reverse engineering and all that. You're not going there, huh?
No, it's not. It's just that, I mean, I didn't know this was a show about crop circles. You know what I mean?
It's not. It's a show about truth, and whatever the truth has.
And it's really, I think basically the focus is how to get people off the fence. This is the crucial thing that needs to happen right now. It's absolutely critical. You have to get off the fence and take action. It's that kind of thing where it's like, well, they're going to take my neighbor, but they're not going to take me. And then it's like they said they didn't do anything because, and then when they came and got me,
the Nazis. So
and nobody came to my aid.
What action should we take, as you said?
Training right now is going on in the neighborhoods of New York to cope with a possible disaster where the country is put under military rule. Neighborhood leaders are being developed. They're being required to sign a statement that says if a disaster occurs and the country is turned over to military rule, that they will follow the orders of the military. Mm-hmm. This is insidious, Alan, and it's happening right here in New York.
We just need to take action, stand up, and be in control of our lives. I mean,
stand up for the truth.
Thank you.
And like what they did to Hitler, when he goose steps, just saying, beat it.
Well, it's going to take a lot of people coming together and overcoming.
That's what it is.
All right. Thank you so much, both of you.
My pleasure, Alan.
Christine Ebersole and Jim Fetzer, for standing up for truth. I'm Alan Steinfeld. If you have any questions, please email me at newrealities@earthlink.net. Thank you both. That was great.
Absolutely.
And energetic. And we should do some more about, really, because, just saying to stand up for the truth is how do we actually take action specifically is the key.
Tell your friends.
Yeah.
And
you start with your friends
Learn
and your
more.
family.
Yep.
And, people
push it.
Around you.
Get these DVDs on public access TV. Have more of these programs.
My position.
Do truth squads hitting these candidates. They're making a difference, Christine. A lot of 9/11 truthers are going out to talk to these candidates. They're asking Giuliani how he knew the buildings were going to fall because he said he was told that the towers were going to fall.